Deuteronomy 6:5 in Hebrew reads, Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, bechol levavcha, uvchol nafshecha, uvchol meodecha. This verse immediately follows one of the most famous verses in the Hebrew Bible, the Shema. The Shema itself has its own grammatical difficulties, and you can see how I've analyzed the verse in the episode we did on Deuteronomy 6:4. A link is found in the show notes. This discussion is the first of 3 on what it means to love God with all of your heart, soul, and strength, the typical translations of the key words in this verse. We will suggest that each of these translations can be improved upon, as they are not the best English terms to reflect the Hebrew. Let's start with talking about the relationship between heart in English and levav in Hebrew. What does it mean to love something with all your heart? First of all, both heart and levav literally refer to an organ. But when we talk of loving someone with your whole heart, we are, of course, not referring to the organ. We are using the word heart or levav metaphorically. Many languages use organs metaphorically to refer to feelings, thoughts, and emotions. Both Hebrew and English do this. The verse is not commanding Israel to love God with all of a certain organ, so it is safe to conclude that levavcha is not talking about the organ here. In this sense, the English word heart is very similar. It has a metaphorical use as well as a literal use. While the words heart and levav refer to the same organ, the more important question is whether they are used metaphorically in the same way, since we have already said that the word levav in the original and the word heart in the translation would have to be interpreted metaphorically. My argument is that the metaphorical use of heart in English is actually a bit different than the metaphorical use of levav in Hebrew, which makes the translation heart in this passage potentially misleading. In Hebrew, there are 2 words for heart which seem to be identical in meaning. There's a shortened form, lev, and a longer form, levav. But while these forms are different, the meanings seem to be equivalent. We will use them interchangeably, just as the Bible does. A very common phrase in the Bible is vayomer belibo. He said in his heart. This is actually the normal way to say he thought in Hebrew, followed by the content of what the thought actually was. So, after Abraham is told that he will have a son at 100 years old, he laughs and says, vayomer belibo, ha leven mea shana yivaled? He said in his heart, will a child be born to a 100-year-old man? The phrase vayomer belibo introduces Abraham's thought. An idiomatic way to say this in English is something like he said to himself, which is essentially equivalent to he thought. So this use has to do primarily with thinking. Other examples are similar. Deuteronomy 29:3 says, Ve'lo natan Adonai lechem lev lada'at, ve'enayim lir'ot, ve'oznaim lishmoa. Adonai has not given to all of you a lev to know, or eyes to see, or ears to hear. How should we understand lev here? Let's begin with the statements it isn't parallel to. The eyes are presented as the organ that allows you to see, and the ears are the means of hearing. In the same way, the lev is said to be the means of knowing. This use is quite different than what we would see with the word heart in English. If you know something in your heart in English, it often suggests that what is known is not true. You might know in your heart that bad circumstances are going to turn out well. In this case, the knowledge that you have in your heart is similar to what you might call an intuition. It is knowledge that at least might be against evidence. In Hebrew, you know things with your heart, just like you see things with your eyes. This is not mere intuition. To know in your heart means to know facts. The closest equivalent in English is probably mind. Just as we see things with our eyes, we know things with our minds, and not really with our hearts in English. These two examples of lev show that while it is used metaphorically, just like heart in English, its metaphorical use is slightly different. The word heart in English is often used for intuitions and feelings. Although the word heart is very broad in its metaphorical use, and lev is also very broad, when it comes to the domain of knowledge, knowing something with the heart in English is different than knowing something with the lev in Hebrew. To know something in your heart is often against facts. To know something with your lev is normally according to facts. The lev is something you think logically and rationally with. So what does it mean to love God with all your lev? My suggestion is that the better translation here is the English word mind. God is calling Israel to love God with their mind and not with their feelings or intuitions, which is what the English word heart often suggests. This also makes the most sense of the verse in context. The next verse says that the words which God is commanding Israel should be on al levavcha, on your mind. What should they do to keep the words on their mind? Verses 7 through 9 elaborate. You should teach the words to your children. You should speak about them when dwelling in your house and when you are out on the road, when you lie down and when you get up. You should tie them as a reminder on your forearms, and you should put them as symbols in front of your eyes. You should write them on the doorposts of your houses and on the gates of your cities. This list is not meant to be exhaustive. It is not as if once you have written the commandments on your doorposts of your house, you have obeyed the commandment. The whole point is that God is telling Israel to put his words everywhere, particularly the commandment to be devoted to him and him alone, so that they are always reminded of it. He wants them to always be thinking about their devotion to him. The way to do this is to constantly flood your mind with reminders. The way to flood your mind with reminders? Put the commandment everywhere around you so that you can't help but see it and remember. This is what it means to love God. Bechol levavcha. It means to love God with all your mind by doing whatever is necessary to keep him constantly in your thoughts.